Ladies and gentlemen, today I'm going to take you through a chess memory in my life, but not one where I was playing. One where I was a coach. Every year, the World Chess Federation hosts the World Youth Chess Championships, anywhere from under 8 to under 18, boys and girls sections, and they're held all over the world. And in 2019, I applied to be a coach for the United States delegation. And I got the job, and that was super exciting for me because I only coach locally here in New York City. To do it on a global scale with some of the best players in the United States to try to win a gold medal, that was super exciting. This video is going to be split into part story time, and then I will show you some chess games and the final result of one of my students. So if you don't want to hear any of the talking, you just want to skip to the chess, I put timestamps on the video player. But let me tell you about the journey. The World Cadet Championship, which is under 8, under 10, and under 12, was set to be held in Weifang, China. Now, Weifang is so remote that people I spoke to who grew up in China did not know it existed. In fact, if you went to Wikipedia and typed in Weifang, the history section of it is completely empty. So I flew 13 hours from New York to Beijing, and I don't sleep on planes, so that was 13 hours of watching movies and reviewing some of my chess-based files. Then I spent 2.5 hours at the Beijing airport. Then I flew to Qingdao. Then I got picked up at the airport. Obviously, we didn't speak any mutual language. And then we drove 2.5 hours to the hotel, which was about 20-25 minutes away from the playing hall itself. I had dinner, and then after being up for like 27 hours, I fell asleep. Take a look at this hype video, and then I'll tell you a little bit more about the tournament. Okay, so a couple of quick things. That building that you saw was the main playing hall. All of the players from all sections play there in different rooms. There's also a section for the parents and the coaches, and there's a little marketplace and just place that you can hang out, check out some art, and so on and so forth. The United States brought such a massive delegation of players that we stayed in our own hotel. Now, our hotel was like 20-25 minutes away from there, and a bus would come pick us up and drop us off. That bus came 2 times an hour, kind of rotating. Other federations that had slightly smaller delegations could stay together. Multiple delegations would stay in the same hotel. So even though we had privacy and we could prepare in peace, it wasn't so great because the whole point of the World Youth is to meet players and people from all over the world. And I'm not gonna lie to you, I was there for 2 weeks. I didn't see anyone else from other federations. Now let me tell you a little bit about our schedule. We would wake up early, like 9-10 in the morning, and before we would have lunch, so first we would have breakfast, we would have 3 coaching sessions, because some of us had 3 students, some of us had 4. They would come in, they would sit with us for 30-40 minutes, and we would prepare for their opponent. The pairings would come out the night before, and we would study the games of the opponent and see how we could match up our openings to their openings and maybe surprise them a little bit here and there. Then we might do some training exercises or some game review, but usually that was safe for after the round. Then the player would go have lunch, go play their game. It would take anywhere between 3 and 6 hours, and then they would come back, we would review, and so on, and life goes on like that for 2 weeks. And so that brings us to my student, who I was paired with when I arrived, that student being Yan Ruyang. She was playing in the girls under 12 section. She was the 2nd seed according to the FIDE ELO. But FIDE ELO at that age doesn't mean much because United States players play a lot more international ranked events, and perhaps somebody from China had never played one, but they played a lot of local tournaments and they were the equivalent strength. So their FIDE ELO was 0, but essentially that's how you have to adjust for different players in different parts of the world. The first 8 rounds of the event were smooth sailing. We had 6 wins and 2 draws and not too much competition, the major competitors being Galina Mikhaeva from the team of Russia and Alua Nurmanova from Kazakhstan. Galina was tied with us and Alua was half a point behind, and it was very clear that these 3 were going to run away with first, second, and third. So I'm going to show you the final 3 rounds, take you through a bit of the story and preparation that went into it, and show you ultimately what medal we got. Let's go. So this is round number 9, and we are paired with Sophie Valea, who actually shares not just the hotel with us, but a delegation. Obviously, she's from the United States, and she was having a great event. She had 6 points out of her first 8, doing very, very well. And we knew that Sophie would go for a Sicilian defense because Ru Yang played e4. And we also knew that we would get the open Sicilian and the dragon Sicilian. And we went kind of before the game, and obviously you're not going to do something crazy. What I learned is that there's no point surprising a player with the Smith Mora Gambit, you know, an opening you don't play at all. You got to play what you know, and most often you got to just kind of defer to what it is you're good at and just be like, I'm the better player. And so I sometimes gave my advice, and you'll see that in the next game. But here I kind of deferred to Ru Yang. I was like, okay, you tell me what you play, and we reviewed her lines f3. This is known as the Yugoslav attack against the dragon. It's when you play bishop e3, f3, queen d2. You use this battery to trade off the dark squared bishop, pay attention, and then you go long castle and try to just storm them. But black plays knight d7 and a6. Now, this structure is a Najdorf, but then you throw in this. This. So black plays a Najdorf and a dragon. To my advanced players watching, you're going to know the answer to what this opening is called. But what happens when you just fuse them? Well, it's called the Dragendorf, or the Dragdorf, but it's the Dragendorf. I mean, you basically try to combine the game plan of both sides, right? So we have queen to d2, and now black plays h5, a preemptive move stopping g4. Very interesting idea. Long castle, b5, bishop slides back, all normal, bishop develops. And here, Ru Yang plays a smart move. She plays king to b1 because the pawns are not scary. It's actually much scarier to be standing on the same file as the rook. So she prevents against rook to c8. Black plays knight c5, just trapping this bishop and saying, I'm going to take it. Water is always good. And Ru Yang plays h3. This move looks like you are preparing g4, and you very well might, but you're preparing something else. You would like to play f4 and prevent the knight from coming to g4 and trading here. Black cashes in on taking this bishop, and here Ru Yang, to the credit and her strength, plays a really good move. She plays c takes b3. And what this does, since you've moved your king off this file, this king is no longer weak, and you make a pawn wall. And that pawn wall is designed against the pawn storm. So you just bolster everything, and you have 6 pawns out of 7 on light squares. So this bishop is pretty terrible. And now you're just going to start an attack. And here black plays knight d7, and normally wants to put this knight on c4, but can't do that. Like, it's much more natural here to play a b3, taking toward the center, but then black gets an attack and is able to chip away, which is why this move is so good. Black goes back. What do? We go forward. That's the idea of the move g4. Black puts the knight on c5. Now we have another very nice idea, queen f2. The idea of this move is to get the queen out of the center so that the rook is pressuring and the bishop is always threatening to take the knight. So if pawn takes, the queen will be hit. Here black played knight back to d7 because, for example, if h takes g4, this is just very bad. You do not want to open this line of attack. You are not ready. So instead, black just goes back. And Ru Yang takes on h5 because black doesn't have an easy decision. Do you take with a pawn and allow the knight, or do you take with a rook? Okay, we have rook takes. Now h4. The idea of this move being that you would like to play h5. But how are you going to play h5? The rook is in the way. Well, sometimes in chess, you need to take 1 step back to take 2 steps forward. How do we get the rook out? Knight back to e2. Not every move in chess needs to go forward. Not every move, because not every move is created the same way. Like it doesn't, you know, this doesn't do anything, but knight to e2 to try to go knight g3, which is exactly what white attempts here, and kicks the rook out, and then plays h5. This is how you make progress. Is that all started from the move h3, g4, then taking h4, slowly building up, and cracking through on that side of the board. Now here, another very smart move, simplifying correctly. The thing is, white is clearly better here. In fact, white is very close to being winning. And you say, how is that possible? If you're like 1200 looking at this position, right? For example, I'm gonna say like an intermediate player. Say, how is white so much better? Like, how does white get a dominant position here? White is castled, all of white's pieces are out, and white has a plan of attack down the middle and on a flank, right? And black's still not fully castled. So white takes on c6, and here plays what I would call a professional move. Bishop to b6. The point of this move is to not let the king go that way, and you just clamp, and this is protected, so you're always monitored, and then and only then will you take. Because now the king is stranded. The king is going to stay there. And we have queen h2 attacking that bishop. The bishop moves, and the queen goes down. And the queen is ready. King comes to f7. And now the bishop drops back to d4. The only move, because again, in chess, you take your foot off the gas for a second, and all of a sudden you get your queen trapped. That's the very annoying thing about chess, is that you could play 27 good moves, but the second you play one bad one, it's all over. We all know that feeling. You play a great game, boom, your queen's gone. Alexandra Botez knows that feeling. That's just the way it goes sometimes, right? So, bishop d4, and black cannot play e5 because I'm gonna just take that. I'm gonna just take that sucker. I got 2 pins, so this bishop is untouchable. So black plays rook g8. Remember that thing about 1 step back, 2 steps forward? Knight to e2. Again, the transfer point of the knight. And now you have knight f4, but you also have rook g1, not rook h1, rook g1, and that's exactly what happens. And now the hunt begins. And there are 2 ways to cash in on any attack in chess. Number 1, checkmate, just destroy everything. Number 2, win material. Win material, just simplify the position and win material. Bishop back to e3. What is black gonna do? Black plays queen e6, bishop g5 check, king d7. Remember, not everything has to be decided by material, by checkmate. Bishop f6. And black can't move. If you take with the queen, which is not what happened in the game, but it still would have led to the same trade, I take, and then I take your rook. And if you don't do anything, then I just take your bishop. And so now black is forced to trade down into this endgame, where white has a rook and a pawn for a bishop. And the way you win an endgame like this one, well, obviously black makes it a little bit easier by playing the move d5, but you would transfer your knight to d5, for example, bring your king up, very slowly trade a pawn, trade another pawn, isolate one of the weaknesses, capture that weakness, and then just win it. And you'll see that's what Ru Yang does. She transfers the knight to d5. Black takes, trying to win that pawn. Rook cuts off the king. And you can even, I mean, there are moments this sacrifice is good. And if you do it right now and simplify and say, well, I have an extra pawn. Actually, you don't, because I take this and then I win. So you need to do it at the right moment. And that right moment is once you bring your king. You could bring your king to e4. And then, for example, do this. This is a winning endgame. And that transition of middle game to endgame, it's an important one. The game ultimately was decided by white infiltrating, capturing, and it led to a checkmate that looked like this, some moves later. The youth players, a lot of them, they will just finish the game off until checkmate. That's generally completely within their own hands, but coaches generally don't really mind that. And so with this, Ru Yang moved after 9 rounds to the score of 8 out of 9, which didn't give her any breathing room because Galina won her game, and Alua won her game, and a few other people won their game. So the race between first and dropping out of that is 5 people. 7, 7, 7.5, 8, 8 out of 9, which takes us to the penultimate round, and that round is round number 10, and we are playing Berchi Rakasa Antonella, and she is from the Philippines, one of the only players of the Philippines delegation. And the cool story about this game is that Berchi had, like, the entire country behind her. We saw on Facebook thousands of people saying support, prayers for you, hopes for you, you're doing great. It was so cool to see that, because some countries like the United States brought, I think, like 120 people, and some countries brought like 5. And that's like the national pride of, like, right there. So it was really cool to see that, even though we obviously had to compete against one another. And having said that, we were studying her games, and she really liked g6. She played g6 all the time. And we were looking at different ideas, right? Do we go back to playing like the way we played last game with kind of bishop e3, queen d2? What are we going to do? And I scouted that a couple of rounds earlier, our opponent against knight f3 does not go into a pierce defense, but goes into a sniper variation with c5. It's known as the sniper because of the bishop on g7. Now, the critical line here for white is to take. It's to take and try to do various tricks associated with this pawn. And for example, queen a5, knight c3, there's lines where black can like triple your pawns and then just ignore it and just go here and castle. She seemed very well prepared. So I said, hey, what about we kill all her fun and you assert your dominance as the stronger player? And for the first 15 moves or so of this game, we were in our prep. And this is what we prepared. I'm very proud of this. C3. You take the pawn, because if you don't take the pawn, I play here, and I play here, and I clamp the queen side, so you have to take. Now, a very tricky move, which doesn't look natural at all. The most natural move here by far is bishop out hitting the queen. Knight A3. Super tricky move. Super, super tricky move. If black just lazily develops on the queen side with the move knight C6, then we can play knight B5, and the queen is short on squares. We try to sneak in over there. Queen's only got one move, and that's the B6. You could actually just very easily trap the queen. Now, black was prepared. Black played knight F6. And we played E5, attacking the knight, knight G4. And now, you know, in this position, there's still different things you can do. You can still go knight B5 and bishop E3, which is what one of her opponents did earlier in the tournament. But we found this idea, and just very simple, trade the queens. And the point here is that we have a central majority. When black castles, we will kick the knight to a passive square. Then we will play this move, attacking this, and it's not easy to defend it. If black plays knight c6, for example, we will go here. If knight takes e5, then after take, you are losing a knight. That's not any good, so you can't do that. And if f6, simple, take. Black has to take with the pawn. If bishop takes, we take the knight. We throw in this check to win a tempo. We back up, and this is where we land. 14 moves gets us to this position where we both have 3-3 on each side, 2-2, and doubled isolated pawns. And I told Ru Yang, I was like, I think you're going to win this position because you know how to play with control. You've got an advantage. Dominate with your more active pieces and prevent her counterplay. And then we studied where black can get counterplay. A6, B5, down the center lines, maybe developing in the center side. In many lines, black has to sacrifice the d-pawn to connect the rooks and open everything up. And so black played a6 and knight c6, which is kind of standard, right? And here, Ru Yang was on her own. So she first plays bishop d6, attacking the rook, but more importantly, just dominating, right? This bishop is just a move behind. Rook e1, simple activation. Black plays b5. We don't move the bishop. We can move the bishop, but Ru Yang here decides to take matters into her own hands and plays d5. And I like it because, for example, if takes, we have takes, and knight c4, which is exactly what happens in the game. Black evaluated this position as good for her, potentially because of the two bishops, but it's actually white who is much better. Because again, doubled isolated pawns, this knight cannot be kicked out because we dominate, and these pieces are just not playing. Black is a move or two behind, it seems, throughout the game. Black plays rook a7, now we pounce with knight d4, bishop d7. Bishop c5, rook to b7, rook d1, and a few moves later, we repeated once, and we have this position. Try to find the maneuver here, and there's multiple, but there's one that's best. There's a maneuver here for white that gives white a dominant and basically completely winning position. And the hint that I'll give you is use the concept of last game. And I'll take a sip of water. One step back, two steps forward, right? Knight to b3. This knight is the only knight that isn't doing damage yet because it's just kind of threatening and lurking. There's no way to stop knight c5. For example, if black plays knight f5, you just go here. You attack the rook. You can also go this way, and this rook just has no moves. For example, if I play rook b5, bishop c7, rook is hit, bishop is hit, game over, right? So you need to play rook a7. At which point I will attack you again, force you to go here, then I will fork your bishop and your rook. And if you play this move, I have a couple of flashy ways to win, but this is the easiest. And it's just beautiful how dominant the trio is, right? It's just, that's the whole point of playing this system, right? And I was so happy we got it on the board. But Ru Yang played b3. She didn't spot knight to b3. She played b3 and allowed black to get back into the game a bit, now getting into an endgame. But we still cashed in on that pawn, which was only made possible because she found the idea d5, transforming the position, right? Creating equal danger, transforming the position advantageously. She ultimately cashes in on that pawn and again, just glides through. And black just never got go. Look at this move, g4, kicks the bishop back, rook c7, bishop has to move again, knight drops back. And she repeated once and then found this nice tactical shot, knight takes pawn, Rook takes bishop check, removing the bishop from protecting the final rook, and now white is just 2 pawns up in the endgame and just begins the slow cleanup process. And you want to know the craziest thing about this game? Just watch as white just converts it, right? Just pushes the queen's head pawns. The game ends here on move 45. You see this bishop? Right? Look at that bishop. Did that bishop ever move? That bishop ever move? That bishop moved there on the second move of the game, which is her entire opening. And we took that bishop's soul, okay? That bishop played 45 moves, and our entire game plan negated black's position and made it so passive that that bishop never got going. The whole opening is named the sniper, and we put the sniper in jail. And that can be, you know, a good current events headline. But I was very happy that she won this game. And after 10 rounds, we had 9. Galina Mikheeva had 9, and Alua Nurmanova had 8.5, and nobody else could catch. After that, all the players lost, so it was a 3-person race, and that takes us to the gold medal game. And by the way, if anybody's made it this far in the video and is wondering, why are they not playing each other? They did. So let me tell you about that before we start the last game. Ruyang had played Galina, they made a draw. She beat Alua. She had defeated Alua from Kazakhstan. So when it's 9-9, 8.5, and the other two played each other, I'm not exactly, I don't exactly remember what the result is. I could have probably looked that up before I started recording this part of the video, but, you know, that's that. If Ruyang wins this game, she either gets gold or silver medal, and most likely she gets gold because she has better tie breaks because of the whole tie break system. If she draws, she gets silver or gold. So win or draw for this game. Should she lose, then she will be guaranteed bronze. She's guaranteed bronze no matter what, but most likely gold is out of the question, unless everybody loses, but most likely that will not happen because these players have done very well. So we are playing Enkbolor Niamdava, and she's from Mongolia. There was a few players from Mongolia, well, what more to do? The story of this game, similar. We saw that this person played that allowed the Sicilian, open Sicilian, everything. This is round 11. Couple of rounds ago, that in the Najdorf, which is what Ruyang plays because she's like a master level player. You 1500s can't play this opening. Bishop g5. And here, the main line is usually e6. But Ruyang plays knight d7, which is the secondary main line. And we saw a couple of rounds prior that queen f3 was on the board. And this is just not a good line. This is just not a good line by white. And we looked at it and we reviewed everything. We reviewed 10 to 15 moves. Queen a5, which is exactly what that last opponent did. And I told Ruyang, I don't think that they're going to repeat this. So we studied different main lines and ideas. I said, in that game, she got a bad position. The coaches are not going to let her repeat it. And they did. They let her repeat all of this. G6, bishop g7, and I remember that at this point we were in the shuttle. The coaches were in the shuttle on the way to the playing hall, and I was getting excited. I was like, oh my god, like this is it right here. This is it. This is the gold medal game. Here we go. What is this queen doing? So knight e5, queen g3, knight g4, right? Every Sicilian player knows that at some point you're going to have a crazy battle. And what ultimately happens here is black is trying to hunt down this bishop. What white should do here is take with this bishop. Why? Because if bishop takes, just very simple, f3, bishop is kicked out, this bishop is preserved, and in the future, black is going to castle and probably get attacked. That's chess. But white plays f4, which is not what you want, because this is not the trade you are looking for. That bishop is so important, and Ruyang is now able to play knight g4, looking to get 2 bishops versus 2 knights, and just plant the knight there. Now, what white can do here is potentially play f5, right, in the future, and white prepares that with the move rook f1. Black plays queen c5 with the idea to pressure the knight, pressure the c-file, b5, etc., rook c8, typical Sicilian counterplay, queen d3, and here castles. White plays knight d5. And the move knight d5 attacks the pawn on e7. And it's funny because if you go back just a few moves, like for example, here, like f4, everything that black has is really good and looks like it makes sense, even up until this moment and like rook f1. But what I would expect here is, rather than transferring the queen, a move like bishop d7, to just immediately go rook c8, b5, and b4, right? Because the queen is not the one that wants to lead the charge. It's just not the queen. It's just not the piece that wants to lead the charge. And so now after rook e8, white plays knight b3, and there's something unfortunate about this position. And the unfortunate thing about this position is the fact that if you play queen c6, then white can play knight d4. And if you play queen c5, white can repeat. And I think Ru Yang saw that and said, you know what? I don't want that. I don't want to repeat moves, and played queen a7. And that allows the fork and the sacrifice of the exchange. And then the trade of a piece. And so now black is in exchange down with the two bishops versus the rook and knight as the balance, and has to create some play, right? So black plays rook c8. But the player from Mongolia was prepared and played f5 and just shot forward. And the question here for black is, do you let them take, or do you take and then go here? And this looks nice. This is a nice freezing of their attack. And this very well could have been the best way for black to play. Stop the attack, trade, because the way it happened in the game is you allowed this, and now it's a lot harder to stop this. And I'm not saying queen f3 is the best move. In fact, that's probably one of the worst moves you could play. But the point being that now queen e6, queen d5, which is such a good move, baiting black to push, and now dropping back, and you are just constantly lurking. King g7, queen comes closer, and you're targeting this, and the bishop is no longer able to go to f6. Do you see what white did there? Check, forcing the pawn to go up a square and infiltrating, and now you can't block on f6. b5, queen comes back. And again, there's just nothing black can do. If black plays queen c7, for example, I just double up and I infiltrate, and you can't stop it. So she forced the queen trade, and here Ru Yang sacked the pawn to go and win it, and again, one step back to go two steps forward, knight f3 check, counterattack, and white is in the clear. Ru Yang is fighting for a draw here. So she has to go king all the way, rook e2, pushing the pawn, the h-pawn, but g4 just in time. And this is hit, and this is hit. And from here, it was white who was just in cruise control. One final important move, c3, because if you take, the tragic bishop f4 arrives at back rank mate, right? Just like we saw a game ago. It's never too late to lose the game in a totally winning position. So c3, and ultimately white simplifies into a two rooks versus rook and bishop endgame. Ru Yang fought and fought and fought, but white is winning here, and the king is just isolated on the h-file, and ultimately on move 72, after a long game, which first had this phase of the two rooks versus rook and bishop, white is just cleaning up. The rest of the game, you know, black got close. Black got a little close to mate, but the rooks cover, and there's just no checkmate. Look at that. White simplifies rook for bishop, check, and then ultimately ended up putting the rook behind the pawn. Of course, white has to not get mated, so white doesn't get mated, gives a couple of important checks, threatens to promote. And again, here, for example, if king to c3, white would give a check and push. So the players did this for a few more moves, and finally the e-pawn arrives, and king goes to hide, and the move rook h5 check is played, and black has to resign. And I remember I was more in shambles than Ru Yang was. She actually took it pretty well. I remember I was eating the leftover lunch. It was like 4 p.m. and the coaches had already eaten their lunch. I was eating leftover lunch, and I was sitting there like, what went wrong, right? How did we lose this game? And ultimately, we did get the bronze medal because on board 2, Galina made a draw, and Alua actually won her game. So 9.5, 9.5, and we got 9 points out of 11 to get the bronze medal. And this is also where I should apologize for naming the video coaching a world champion, but she's damn near close. She came so close. And I remember I was sitting there and just thinking, like, what went wrong in the opening? What could we have done? Because this is not good. Like, this line is not good. Could we have done something better? Was there some better way we could have played this? And there was. On move 9, white is lost. On move 9, knight to e5 just wins the game because of this pin and this queen attacked. And for example, if queen to g3 just takes because of this pin, and there's just nothing you can do. Like knight e5, if queen f4, for example, which guards this, there's the absolutely gorgeous move g5. Look at that. And normally you would lose your rook if you did this, but you hit the queen. It's actually a double attack. Your rook attacks the rook, and the queen is under attack too. So white just lost the game so quickly. And it was because Ru Yang played a little bit too fast. And I had warned her before the game. I actually said, that was one bit of coach. I was like, you're going to be a little bit more nervous because it's the gold medal game. As much confidence as you think you have, just slow it down, especially if she plays this. And I remember I was telling her, like, you might get a winning opportunity very early. But after that, when she played this a little bit slowly and then played this whole idea, it was just a complex game. And we didn't make the right decision. Like, the queen going to c5 was incorrect. Probably here it was better, again, to keep the queen exactly where it was and then start an attack with the rook on the c-file. But that's all it takes sometimes. It takes one wrong move, and suddenly white is cruising. And then you say, well, why didn't she just take the repetition? That's how it goes sometimes. You live and you learn. But the bronze medal was achieved by Ru Yang, and I mean, she's an exceptional player, and this video is a lot less about my coaching and a lot more about, you know, just the chess memory and how strong of a player she is. I am sure she will go on to become a FIDE master, international master, and I hope grandmaster one day. And last but not least, for those of you that made it this far in the video, I just want to tell you that I appreciate you very much. Thank you for tolerating story time, and I hope you enjoyed all the games and the whole experience. And I will leave you with this picture that we took with Katarina Nemtsova, who was one of the coaches of the US delegation, also a fantastic player, really good ping pong player, because all the coaches would spend lunch hour when the students were playing, watching the games on our phones and playing ping pong. And we took this photo. This is actually after the final game, so very good spirits. Your humble coach, looking far younger. Even though this was less than 2 years ago, I look like I've aged 10 years, pandemic, and being a streamer will do that to you. So the hotel that we were at was filled with those red symbols. They were symbols for, you know, good luck and good health and good fortune and all these things. And hopefully all of you have good health and good fortune. And I hope you enjoyed that story. Let me know if there's any others that you'd like for me to cover, any concepts I haven't covered. And yeah, I'll see you in the next video.